So I normally would crack out Winston to rep myself, like, in my commentating stuff, but since I've been shitposting about this for the longest time... Fuck it, we rollin' Junkrat. So like I was saying, I've been mentioning this matter on Twitter for a long while, and everything that's happened with this situation has a special place in my heart. Now remember though, this is concerning a rather controversial movie as of late, so I will try to introduce what's up in the most non-polarizing way possible. Okay, real talk, GwussBusters 2016 is a cataclysmic masterpiece of cinematic failure. You know what? You in the back? Keep glaring at me. Look at all the fucks I'm giving at this exact moment in time. See, these aren't fucks, these are box office scores. An abysmal opening weekend, merch going on clearance before the movie even went out, potential memes to ridicule it for years! What I meant to say was this movie didn't exactly do well. For real, this reboot turned into an absolutely fascinating case for me. It had people involved that were actually fairly respected for their prior work, and plenty of cash behind the project, and yet still managed to do nearly everything wrong prior to opening day. It's so remarkable that I decided to do an entire video making a play-by-play of every reason I could find for this movie's failure. So, let's get this party started! Now, context is vastly important for getting to why everything here happened in the way that it did. When this movie originally was shown off, we were at a time where we had seen movie after movie either rebooting old films or working with old properties. This was a point where people were getting sick of seeing products being unfaithfully made using the works of fiction they loved. For God's sakes, people try to make a Battleship movie. How the fuck? And let's not forget, Ghostbuster fans were hyped over the idea of a new sequel in the series for years. It was hyped so long that the 2008 Ghostbusters game basically came in and acted as the movie people were waiting for. The only thing that was stopping the hype train from building up more speed was the death of Harold Ramis, as unfortunate as that is. So with the death of Egon, the massive hype and expectations for something new and good with Ghostbusters, and a stigma against Hollywood poorly milking old ideas, there was gonna be quite a challenge with this one. Even though the movie had plenty to work with, it would still face a bit of an uphill battle. Also, there were two additional factors that you wouldn't think would play a part with the new Ghostbusters movie. One, we have a market for journalism that's been made volatile by either journalists lacking professionalism or constant distrust by consumers that call out said unprofessional journalists. This is the case regardless of political alignments. It happens on either side of politics. And two, this came out at a time where a concept as previously benign as feminism had become a dirty word due to constant issues brought up regarding the movement. The repercussion of this with Ghostbusters is that, because of this environment, the people of the internet are practically trained to sniff out poor or false female empowerment. If you try to do girl power and can't pull it off right, the net will immediately see through you and will metaphorically eat you alive. Once again, these are two tidbits of info that might seem miscellaneous, but regardless, remember it for later. Now that the scene has been set, let's see the actual nature of the movie. This new Ghostbusters is a reboot, not a sequel. People wanted a sequel to the series, and trying to redo a movie people already loved was already a misstep. The movie would not only be compared to the original, but people would think it's trying to go toe-to-toe with what the original did. Basically, not a lot of room for error with this plan. And that's where the other highly questionable steps started to come in. The movie also deviated from the original by being a straightforward comedy instead of having more of a horror focus. That change of pace is literally as jarring as turning Banjo-Kazooie into a vehicle building simulator. The first film had characters going against absurd circumstances while being relatively straight-faced, with Fake's newer reboot giving a wink-wink and nudge-nudge every so often about how absurd things are. Basically, it's trying to give the fans something they most likely wouldn't want with the same label as the thing they would want. And finally, the main characters being an all-female cast. Realistically, this wouldn't do much at all to kneecap the film if Sony knew what they were doing with the reboot. But you probably have an idea where this will play a role later on.
But now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Let's get ready for the trailers!
I really don't have to say much about the trailers. Everybody knows how unlike the first trailer was. Hell, my literal first thoughts at that, even before I developed any hard feelings for the film, were, "That was thoroughly unimpressive." And so the internet took my sentiment and magnified it tenfold. Not only did the first trailer do a terrible job at off-putting any fears people had about the reboot, There's also something in the latter trailers that would become hilarious later for all of the wrong reasons. Remember, they used a line from the movie in which Leslie Jones's character says,
I don't know if this is a race thing or a lady thing, but I'm mad as hell.
I don't know why I did the voice. Keep that quote in mind for later as well. Oh, and the best part with all this? We haven't even got to it yet, because as soon as the first trailer for GB 2016 became one of YouTube's most disliked videos, guess who showed up to join them? The Call of Duty Infinite Warfare trailer. These two disliked trailers showing up at the same time only gave one message. If fans want something out of you with a property and you give them something with that property,
you best hope you're giving them what they wanted, otherwise they ain't having any of it.
Now you would expect, with such a horrible dent in Sony's PR for the trailers, that there would be some damage control coming up, right?
Well, the Sony boys got a scheme going with some journalists because they thought,
hey, we got some female main actresses going on here. We gonna squeeze some value out of that casting, or we gonna have the movie die trying. So, some media powwows later, and we got various articles saying that people were hating on the GwussBusters reboot out of sexism towards the leads they had. Yeah, you know those handful of comments that 10-year-olds and trolls say about women? You know, the ones of people that don't know what the fuck they're talking about or just are done to piss off oversensitive people? Well, Sony decided to send some of their employees into the comment section of the first trailer, clip out the actual critical comments with valid reasons to hate on the trailer, and they left in the sexist shit that realistically no one in the comments really cared about. But there's just one problem with this big-ass narrative the journalists and Sony were trying to spin. People realized what Sony was doing right away. They caught on real fast about Sony trying to pull some amateur social engineering. That realization led to people labeling any simple note of approval towards the movie in the original trailer's comments as a message from a Sony robot. Talk about backfiring. And guess what? Again, it doesn't end there. There were other journalists with similar narratives to spin that showed disapproval towards the reboot over how stereotypical Leslie Jones' character was. The whole situation turned out to be like her quote from the trailers. People thought it was likely going to be a race thing or a lady thing, but it didn't matter because the whole deal got a lot of people mad as hell. And you want to know why Sony's marketing people fucked up even harder? They started putting out merchandise way too early relative to the movie's release. The fact that they were trying to throw out action figures weeks, or hell, months if I remember correctly, before the movie actually came out, did nothing but make Sony look like they were trying to pull a simple cash grab. Plus, the stuff with the action figures helped in spoiling who the big bad guy in the reboot was. With this and everything else, you can see why action figures like this didn't sell for shit. At this point, however, I have to real talk, since this is the point where GwussBusters 2016 failing found a special place in my soul. Eventually word got out with a leaked email between Sony employees that they were willing to threaten Bill Murray with litigation if he didn't cameo in the new movie. I shit you not, they wanted to fuck up Peter Venkman himself with legal troubles if he didn't play ball. That was the reason why people quickly started remembering that the original cast members for the first film were actors, and couldn't take their approval of the new movie at face value. So at this point, I think a brief intermission is needed. By this point, it was safe to say that countless people wanted this movie to never succeed, and hey, guilty as charged, am I right? This movie had such terrible production that I remember seeing a Reddit submission in which a guy from GB16's production team did a text synopsis of the first cut just to tell the public how stupid it is. The original entry for this is long gone, but the only movie I can recall getting sabotaged that badly in production is Food Fight. And you'd think that Sony and the director Paul Feig would want to change up their strategies to properly damage control for the mess they got themselves in. Needless to say, the situation didn't get better from here. Because in comes the Rolf, James Rolf to be exact. Now we could talk about how he made a video saying how he didn't want to see the reboot for quite understandable reasons. We could talk about how he had a bit of hyperbole where he said he'd go and see a GwussBusters sequel if it was just them taking a shit. Or we could say this is really where the journalists come in to double down on garbage. Yeah, The journalists got greedy and decided they want to try to redeem themselves in Sony after the massive backfire earlier. So they thought, let's try to make a pariah out of the AVGN for not humoring this bullshit. Unfortunately, they didn't realize that people will instantly revolt when they cause so much trouble and now started picking on one of the least vitriolic people not wanting to see the movie. I literally just want to go up to the press people responsible there and ask, you know throwing charcoal into fire doesn't extinguish shit, right? Because there was no way in hell that there were many GwussBusters fans that would respect the reboot after this constant mud throwing that the media tried to pull. Now, if you're willing to say that there should have been plenty of fans that were at least wanting to give the movie a chance at this rate, I'm gonna stop you right there, because the people at Sony decided to straight up bite the hand that might feed them. It's remarkable how it took Sony this long, and yet they still didn't figure out how the internet works. You see, the unspoken rule of the internet is that people will always do that vulgar ass 4chan level shit talking in some way or another. It will happen. But the thing is, you're not supposed to make that shit talking seem valid. Unfortunately, Sony took most of the respect that people had for their reboot and carved it to pieces. Even if the review embargoes could work their magic and make the movie seem alright before release, there would already be plenty of people that would wait on rentals and piracy just to see the reboot out of spite. While I cannot condone piracy in this scenario, the new film's bad history makes it difficult to personally condemn it. Now, if you're bright, you've probably asked yourself why the global sales of GwussBusters haven't been saving the reboot. Look at how big of an audience China is for big budget movies. Why can't the GwussBusters here have a piece of that pie? Not so fast, buddy. There was a reason the reboot didn't count on going to China. You see, Chinese censorship is super stingy on having things relating to death in media. Promoting skulls, bones, and especially supernatural elements concerning the dead are apparently big no-nos over there. Seriously, you could try to localize Undertale for Chinese audiences, and the government would probably shit its pants over papyrus. So given that GB16 is based around ghosts, I mean obviously, China wouldn't let it in. And I can't believe that I, of all people, didn't think of this considering how much PC games are affected by this. And really, how hilarious is it when you consider a character from Chinese mythology named Zhang Kui? This guy would apparently roam the world, vanquishing all manner of demons and ghosts. How funny is it that the country with lore about the world's first ghost-busting character would help put nails into Ghostbusters' coffin?
But nothing could compare the movie for dealing with its final critical flaw. Emphasis on critical, because the overall consensus on how the film itself was, objectively was...
sorta okay-ish. Let me guess, you were expecting me to say terrible. Well, no. When you even out all the reviews, it comes out to just mediocre. Seriously, the word most frequently used to describe the new Ghostbusters is meh. Surprisingly, that doesn't upset me whatsoever. In the long run, mediocrity here is worse than the movie being terrible. Think about it. If the film isn't viewed as very good, and it's not bad to the point where it gets attention for that, and the people behind it are hated on to the nth degree, what reason is there to see it in theaters? Yeah, exactly. None. The reboot would be forgotten in no time, and the film would die with few folks even realizing it. Quick question. If a Hollywood production falls over dead in the forest and no one hears it, does the press still lie and say it was successful? Anyways, if anyone wonders why the Ghostbusters 2016 reboot didn't do very well upon opening weekend, this might give you a bit of an idea. Well, that was fun. Who's for Chinese food? Where was I? Oh yeah. God's precious water. It's like I could have a leg in one hand and a brer in the other. I need to stop with the memes. All aboard the burp train, baby.